Not this time, my fading memory. You don't win today. So here is a flow chart about all of what goes into a campaign. So political leader, let's just put up here Kevin Stitt, who's running for governor. All of these components are a part of helping him get elected. You have a campaign strategy team. These are people who would be consultants, maybe considered experts on how to run a campaign. And there are professional campaign consultants. They will help recruit other people to be on this team, people who have expertise in certain areas. Like you'll want someone who will have expertise in dealing with the media, someone who is an expert at helping raise funds. So you put together a campaign team, and you have a few strategic leaders who then put together these smaller committees or these smaller groups. Like you get a key financial person who will then put together their team for finances, and so on and so forth with all of these other groups. Ground campaign would be a campaign that would be like the grassroots campaign that we talked about. Sorry. You would have someone who would take care of the mass media campaign, the online campaign. So all of these things make up the flow chart or the pyramid of helping get this person elected. Here's another more complicated flow chart. None of these will be on the test, so you don't have to worry about them. But just to kind of give you an idea of all that goes on to get a person elected, but also remember, you can participate in politics by being a part of some person's campaign. And it's not limited to what you can do. You could do any of these things. So whatever you might have talent in, or whatever field you go into in your life, you might be able to add your expertise in that area to someone's campaign. Of course, it takes a lot of money to run a campaign. For example, in 1980, so we're talking a generation ago, 42 years ago, $250 million was spent on all Senate and House campaigns combined. This is on the national level. So in 2000, we're talking 20 years later, it quadrupled to 1 billion. So if that rate continues to go, continues to be the case, that inflation, 2 years ago in 2020, it would have been around 2 billion. Or I guess if it quadrupled again, it would have been around 4 billion. Do you agree with me? That's a lot of money. I bet there's a lot of money wasted that could be used for homeless people, for crisis shelters. Yeah. So that's one of the, although I'm glad to live in America and have our political system where we have our freedoms, there should be some way to help people running for candidate to not have to use so much money. And there has been senators who have tried to pass campaign finance reform so that, one, they want to make it even for all candidates. So if they said you can spend $5 million. That would mean someone like Trump, who has unlimited money, wouldn't be able to spend a lot more money than someone who is not a billionaire. If you have a lot more money, you can do a lot more things. So that's one reason for campaign finance reform, is to make it a more level playing field, but then to not have to waste so much money on finances. I mentioned earlier in class, I think that all candidates, after an election is over, they should be required to have to go out after the election and get rid of all their campaign signs, because they're causing money to be spent by counties who have to clean up all those signs. So money could be saved, I think, but there is a lot of money spent. Social media campaign, the social media aspect has become much more important in the last few years with the advent of the internet, and then to the cell phones and all the devices that can now be set up on social media and the World Wide Web. So this has become a very vital part of campaigning. President Obama in 2008 and 2012 kind of was the leader in kickstarting this aspect of campaigning, because with social media, you can reach a lot more voters than you could with just a grassroots campaign and television and radio. With social media, you and I, let's say there was a debate last week between Governor Stitt and his opponent, Joy Hoffmeister. Let's say there was a debate on channel 6 Tulsa, for example, but it was happening at a time that we couldn't be there. Well, with social media, we can go to Channel 6's their website, whether on a computer or our phone, and we can pull up the debate and watch it. So we can view content a lot better on our own time. Because of social media, right? And President Trump was kind of the master of this. If someone criticized him, he quickly put out a tweet to react to his competition. Social media may pull in voters who really would not normally be interested. They wouldn't watch a debate. They wouldn't listen to the news on the radio. They don't read newspapers. With the advent of the social media campaign, candidates can even talk with their voters, dialogue with them. Maybe do a town hall Zoom or Microsoft Rooms meeting, and hundreds, thousands of people can join it. This is a way to reach younger voters, social media campaign. And even before social media, there were some of the efforts that candidates would do to reach younger people. They started going on in the 90s with Bill Clinton. They started going on to the late night talk shows. So around 1991 or 2, Bill Clinton was on an old show called Arsenio Hall. And he met with Arsenio and played his saxophone. So mostly younger people watched the late night comedy shows. So a lot of young people became familiar with Bill Clinton, and they probably thought, oh man, this guy's cool. He plays the saxophone. He's like one of us. But now social media is a much more effective tool to reach you younger folk, you young whippersnappers. All right, some old campaign posters. America, Reagan country. Who was the first television president? Television and movie president. Donald Trump? Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was a movie star before he became a politician. He was also a Democrat before he became a Republican. Yes, we can vote Obama 2008. All right, let me find the chapter 11 slides. This could be short, guys, because I haven't looked over them. I forgot to update them and stuff. Anybody got a new joke for us? A good joke for us today? Well, I'm looking.
How much does a chimney cost?
How much does a chimney cost?
Nothing. It's on the house.
Ah, but I like it. It's a good dad joke. One of my favorite Facebook groups that I'm a part of is dad jokes. All right, yeah, see, I almost pulled up the wrong slides. Anyone else a joke for us?
Why do golfers bring 2 pairs of socks?
Why do they bring 2 pair of socks?
In case they get a hole in one.
Awesome. Ba-dum-bum. All right, you're in luck. I found it. Did anybody else think of a joke real quick while you were listening to them? Do you know how to catch a squirrel? Climb up a tree and act like a nut? Nut, squirrels eat nuts. Okay. What did the cow say to the fence post? Moo. I love that one. That's a pure dad joke right there. Okay. Chapter 11, interest groups. Interest groups. All right, this is another linkage institution. And remember, linkage institution is not in the textbook, but it is in the slides, one of the previous chapters, and it is in a previous lecture along with today's, and it will be on the test. So, but an interest group is another linkage institution like a political party that, in line with its name, links citizens to the practice of governing. An interest group is a group of people who share common goals and who organize so that they will influence government. But whereas political parties are trying to get people into government or the personnel, interest groups are trying to influence policy. So that's kind of, remember the 2 P words to differentiate political parties and interest groups. Political parties are a linkage institution that try to influence the personnel of government. Interest groups are influencing the policy of governments. They too spend a lot of money and they put in a lot of effort to try to persuade the leaders in government to either support bills that they want to be passed, or for the legislatures to make bills with interests that are very important to them. When we talk about interest groups, this gives us another dimension to democracy that is called a pluralist democracy. Pluralist, you guys remember your English lessons, singular and plural, how to know when a verb needs to be singular or plural. I was is singular, you were is plural. So the idea of plural is more than one. So this dimension of democracy called pluralist democracy is the idea is that individuals, plural, can find their strength only in numbers, collectively. And so they join together with other people who have the same interests and concerns to get representation. These are just a couple more differences between political parties and interest groups. Here are some examples of some interest groups. PETA is an interest group, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. If you have a heart for little fur babies and little reptiles that crawl on the ground and run across your foot, and you don't want them to be mistreated, you can join PETA. If you're a vegetarian and you want to see the stoppage of slaughtering of animals for meat, you can join PETA. Be a part of that interest group. Another famous one is the National Rifle Association. If you're a hunter and you like your guns and you got 2 huge safes in your basement where all your hunting guns and ammo and everything is concerning hunting, and you don't want that taken away, you can join the National Rifle Association. Those are groups, PETA and the NRA, those are groups that have like a specific issue. There are some groups like the American Medical Association that represent people in the medical field, doctors and nurses, and try to get legislation and policies passed that will benefit them. Greenpeace would be a kind of a single issue group that's focused on taking care of the earth, the green movement. So interest groups can be broken up into several types. And if you haven't done your Chapter 11 worksheet, there is a question on, I think, the 7 different types of interest groups. Like you have groups that would be, excuse me, let me get a sip of water. Economic interest groups, like an interest group for businesses. And none are coming to mind, no specific names, but you might have an interest group that is made up of several companies that, well, let's say, I think there's an American Auto Workers group. So you would have, it represents workers for Ford, Chevy, Dodge, All American Auto Groups. They would look out for their workers to have, a decent minimum wage, safe working conditions, that women who get pregnant would be able to have maternal leave. So they're looking out for economic interests of the people in those businesses. Now, also called corporate interest groups, that's the largest group of interest groups, if I remember correctly. Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. We'll just look at it here in the textbook. All right, we got time for a joke while I'm looking for this, if anybody has one. Too late, I got to it. All right, types of interest groups. This is straight from the text. Corporate groups and trade associations. Here's a couple of examples. The American Beverage Association. So Coca-Cola, Pepsi. Are there any other cola businesses besides those two? Because Dr. Pepper is a Pepsi product. Mr. Pibb is a Coke product. I guess some of your smaller cola companies like I was going to say Fanta, but I think Fanta's Coke. But anyway, they would be in that group. And so that's the biggest type of group. There's labor groups. And this would be what I mentioned earlier, United Auto Workers, but they're not a business group, they're a labor group. Because they focus on the workers of those groups to make sure about all those issues, minimum wage and vacation leave and things like that. Professional associations. The American Medical Association that I mentioned would be a professional association for doctors and nurses. My wife, who is now a teacher, but before she was a physical therapist, she is a member of the American Physical Therapy Association. That's an interest group that looks out for the interests of physical therapists. Citizens groups. This would be like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, or MAD, or AARP, American Association for Retired People. You can see that they're groups that represent a certain segment of citizens. Government groups, and then think tanks. Think tanks are groups that do thinking. That is, they conduct research and they promote policy alternatives. So you might have a group that, let's say, and I might have an example of that on the slides here. Let's see. I think there's a think group called the Rand Corporation. And so they recruit a lot of smart people people with PhDs to do research on things. And so I know there's some think tanks that are doing research on climate change, global warming. They're trying to think up of ways to cut down on carbon emissions and cut down on greenhouse gases. They're doing research on those things and trying to come up with better policies that they then want the legislatures to pass. I think if I start a think tank called the King Bings think tank, would some of you consider being on it after you get your degrees? No? What if you all know what it's going to be about? The King Bings think tank would be about how to introduce the 80s culture into classrooms on a regular basis. Wouldn't you guys want to help me with that? All righty. So there are a lot of interest groups. That's why I have this slide. I'm wanting to say, I was going to say 11,000, but I think that's, that's not the right number. There's hundreds of interest groups. So they literally are everywhere. Here you can see some more. Look, if you wanted to be involved in politics beyond voting and giving money, if you didn't want to be a part of a campaign, you might consider being a part of an interest group, especially with something that you're passionate about. And I guarantee you, whatever you're passionate about, you can probably find some interest group that's working on that issue or similar issues, and they would be happy for you to come along and work on, to broaden their reach. What do these groups do? Well, they go to Congress and they lobby. They are lobbyists. And what that means is they set up an office in Washington, D.C. So you'll have there's an NRA office in Washington, D.C. There's a PETA office in Washington, D.C. And then people who are a part of them will go to Congress on certain days and they will lobby, which means they will try to meet with congressmen and women and influence them on policy. They will start letter writing campaigns. So for example, if someone has a membership to Greenpeace, someone has joined Greenpeace, and you can be a part of an interest group just by becoming a member and paying a monthly due or a yearly due. You join Greenpeace, you've seen those commercials, right? For the animals that are neglected, join this group and we'll send you this nice little plush panda bear and a t-shirt. So you can join interest groups and just be a member by contributing money. But sometimes they might ask you to, we need all Greenpeace members to write letters to your congressman. Or we need you to make phone calls. Call your representatives and tell them your opinion. Now, leadership in the interest groups also will go before congressional committees and give testimony. The think tanks with their PhD members especially will, after having done their research, will call for a meeting with a committee and testify before it. So that is what they do in terms of their relationship to Congress. In terms of their relationship to the public, they will educate the public, they will inform the public, and they will try to be that linkage institution to engage the public in politics. There are different types of lobbying groups. You can read about that when you have these slides available this afternoon. I love political cartoons. So you remember there's three branches of government: judicial, executive, and legislative. The lobbyists are leaning heavily upon the legislatures, the congressmen, to get their things done. They're like a big fat cat that's almost hard to see sitting on the branch of the legislature. A couple of more things to mention and we'll call it a day. You will find these in your textbook and you do need to know them for the test. One is an iron triangle. An iron triangle is a large, not real large, but a group that is made up of three components. Thus, the use of the word triangle. Tri means three. It's a three-sided group made up of interest groups, bureaucratic groups, and we haven't got to the bureaucracy yet, but I will tell you that we'll be getting into that next module. But the federal bureaucracy is a group of about 12,000 government workers who are not in Congress. They're not elected officials. It's not Supreme Court judges, and it's not the president and his cabinet. These are 12,000 or so federal workers. And amongst those, there are bureaucratic agencies like the Department of Agriculture. So that's just a quick little info about what a bureaucracy is, but working together with interest groups. So let's say there's an interest group, let's say the American Farmers Association. They are working with the Department of Agriculture. And the third leg of the triangle are a smaller committee or a subcommittee of congressmen and women. So let's say you have the American Farmers Association and the Department of Agriculture, and then a little subcommittee. Let's just say it's a subcommittee on small sheep farmers, okay? They're working together to get things done for small sheep farmers. The interest groups are informing the Department of Agriculture. The Department of Agriculture is informing the subcommittees. The interest groups are also informing the subcommittees. The interest groups are raising money and giving them to the senators for their campaigns. The committees are approving the budgets that the Department of Agriculture is putting forth. The interest groups are trying to get more money for their more money in the budget for the small sheep farmers. These iron triangles are working together to get things done. Okay, that's one thing that's in the textbook. The other thing is issue network. So you can remember these two things because they both begin with the letter I. Iron triangles and issue network. What is an issue network? An issue network is a little bit bigger. It's a bigger network, obviously. It's a bigger group than an iron triangle. And you can see here it's got people from interest groups, like an iron triangle. It's got people from Congress, and it's got bureaucracies like an iron triangle, but also it will use people like people from universities, university professors. So that if we continue to use our example from the iron triangle, you have the American Association Interest Group. You have a subcommittee for small sheep farmers. You have the Department of Agriculture. And then you might have professors from an agricultural university like Oklahoma State that are consulting and giving advice in this network about sheep farming. Then you might have people in mass media. You might have state government leaders from the state of Oklahoma. For example, you might have the Department of Agriculture, the Oklahoma branch, and the one who works with sheep farmers as a part of it. So the issue network is a broader group working to get things done, but an issue network, once it gets its job done, will dissolve. Iron triangles tend to last a long time. Issue networks come up when a need arises. So know about those things. Okay, you need to make sure, because I'm going to shut it down, you read about PACs and super PACs. You'll have the slides here. It is in the textbook. But very simply, PACs are political action committees that interest groups form to help get money to candidates. Super PACs are basically what I say, PACs on steroids. They also raise money, but here's the difference. Make sure you write notes for this or pay attention. PACs raise money and they give it directly to the candidate. Super PACs raise a lot of money, but it does not go directly to the candidate. The super PACs have to spend the money themselves for the candidate, but they cannot give the money directly to the candidate and their campaign. PACs do give their money to candidates, and they can only raise so much money. I think it's $5,000. Super PACs can raise an unlimited amount of money, and they have become very, very influential in politics during the last 25 years. So, any questions on that Chapter 11 material? So I'm going to post this video today along with the slides. Make sure you do your worksheets. Get them in by the assigned times. And you'll be able to use those along with your textbook and the videos and slides for the test, which you will get at after class Monday and have until the beginning of class Wednesday.